Hello friends, welcome to the step-by-step video for Scooter Claus, the Artful Webinars ornament class that I'm teaching in October. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you the background ombre effect and also give you a little demo of how I roughed up the edges with my X-Acto knife. And then what I'll do is I'll put the pattern on and do the base painting off camera, because that's stuff that you really don't need a video to see how it's done, but at least you'll have it to reference to make sure that you have all your spaces painted in. So we're going to get going. This is a little 6x5 inch rectangle that I used. I have them on my website, or you can cut your own, or you can adapt it to fit any surface that you have in your stash. And the first thing we're going to do is we want to get out Moody Blue and Warm White. And you want to use a fairly large flat brush to do this. So we're going to be working wet on wet. And the first thing I'm going to do is, here, I have a giant brush. I got this giant brush on sale. It's 1.5 inches. So that always makes these things go fast. If you have 1 inch, that would be great. So I'm going to give this a coat of Moody Blue quickly. It's a little warm here today, so things are going to dry a little faster than normal. It's always a little warm here in California, what can I say? Even in winter, we don't really have winter. So anyway, let us get this. All right, I've got a coat of Moody Blue on. Now this is still wet, so I'm going to load my brush again with Moody Blue, and I'm going to pick up Warm White on one edge and kind of just blend it on my palette. Now starting with the white towards the bottom, I'm going to blend this lighter value. It doesn't have to be, blended perfectly or anything like that, but I just want to get a lighter blue going from the bottom towards the top. So it's easy peasy. If you get too much white, you can always go back in with your Moody Blue and tone it down a little bit, but I'm just gonna do that, a little bit of an ombre effect. Now I picked up a little Moody Blue, and I'm gonna work it back down into this just to make sure I got it blended a little softer. So there, I'm going to step away, dry this, and then I'll come back and show you what I did with my X-Acto knife. All right, I'm back. This is dry. I've sanded it lightly so it's a smooth painting surface. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna rough up this edge around this plaque with the X-Acto knife. And I just always like to do weird little things to my pieces just to make them different. So if you have an X-Acto knife, get it out and we can do this. The important thing is you want to be cutting away from you. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down kind of at a 45-degree angle, and I'm just going to go through and shave off some of the edges. Some of them are going to get shaved off a little deeper, but this just kind of adds another unique piece of interest to this piece. Otherwise it would just be a plain old rectangle, and I guess that's okay, but I just like to be different. It only takes a few minutes, and it's a kind of a neat thing to do. Now later on we'll take our finger and run it along here and paint that edge darker, but for now, there you go. I've roughed up those edges with my X-Acto knife, and I didn't cut myself. So we are doing great. So the next thing I'm going to do is clean up these little pieces of MDF. I'm going to put my pattern on and do some base painting. So I will be back when I have that done, and I'll point out the different areas so you'll be sure that you have yours all based in correctly. All right, base coating's done, and just to go through it quickly, we're going to paint his face, including his nose, and just avoid you don't have to avoid the goggles, with coral shell. Then I want you to paint the toy sack with honey brown, and you can go ahead and paint right through that tie there. You're going to paint the candy cane with warm white, the gingerbread with sable brown, and the little horn, that's what that is, with golden straw. The hat and his suit and this bulb on the front of the scooter are painted with country red. The trim on his hat, which includes the pom-pom and the brim, and the trim on his suit are painted with fawn. You're going to paint his beard and his mustache with slate gray. You're also going to paint the trim on the tail light, the muffler, and the hubcaps with slate gray. You want to paint the windshield, that's what that is, with Blue Haven. You want to paint his glove with forest green. You want to paint the seat, his boots, the tires, and that little circle in there that's his handlebars with graphite. And then this, I neglected to put this in the prep instructions, but the scooter itself is painted with Irish moss. So we have all those done, and I've gone ahead and put on the detail pattern that we need for right now. We didn't put the goggles on because we need to do some things to the face before we put the pattern on for the goggles. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to get out some sapphire blue, and I want to float some shading around the scooter Claus and Santa Claus and the toy bag. You don't have to do it on the ground so much under the tires, and then all the way around the outside edge with sapphire blue. And now I know there are a lot of little places in here, so just tuck in some shading there. You don't have to be real perfect. It's just to pop Santa off the background a little bit in his scooter. So a side load float of sapphire blue all the way around. So just get it in there as best you can. I'm going to bounce around a lot and do different places while I let other places dry. So it doesn't have to take a career. It doesn't have to be a perfect float. So, don't spend a whole lot of time on it. Don't forget, in this little area here next to his hand and his shins there, if you get it on there, it's okay. You cover that up with lots of fluffy stuff. Okay, let me go back down this one. See, I'm not being real careful. It's just to pop him off the background a little bit. It's always easier. A lot of times I will do this shading before I even do base coating. That makes it really easy, because then I don't have to worry about getting the shade color on different things. Tuck a little bit in here. Doesn't have to be a full-on float. And around the horn, a little bit around the gingerbread man. I'm going to come over here to the other side of his hat. I'm going to tuck it in around the candy cane. So you see, it doesn't have to take a long time to do this. And there is a lot of things on the background, some spattering and some snowflakes. So you don't have to worry too much about getting this perfect. You do want to get a little bit inside by the seat and the tail light. And now I've done a quick little float around the design. So now I'm going to go and float around the outside edge. And don't worry too much about this cut edge because that gets painted darker later. So I just want to do a quick float. Oops, that wasn't very good. Kind of picked up a lot of paint there. See, it happens. So I can just drag that around there. All right. All right, cool. So that part's done. So we're gonna work on his face next, and you luck out he doesn't have eyes to work on. So we're gonna dry brush some highlighting on his nose and cheeks. You could do it all over his face, that it just gets covered up. But that is gonna be done with warm white. And now, if you have a way you like to dry brush, by all means use that way. This is a 10 Royal Langnickel short round sable that I like to dry brush with. And so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to dry brush some warm white in his nose and get some down there in his cheek area. And basically I just go across his whole face. Okay, let's see. We are going to float a highlight across the top of his nose with warm white. So you want that to stand out just a little bit more. So I'm going to do a side load float of warm white across the top of his nose. So that makes his nose stand out a little bit. I'm going to float shading with dried clay. I used to use shading flesh, but that's no longer, so dried clay is a nice substitute. And we are going to float that shading all over his face, basically. I'm going to blend it out well. We're going to go under his hat brim here. You want to go down the sides of his face. So both sides of his face. You want to go in the bottom of his nose, so it's like a C-stroke of dried clay in the bottom of his nose. And then you're going to go on his cheeks and then up around his nose, on his face above his nose. Okay, so we got that shading done. We need to let this, blow on it a little bit. What we want to do is we want to float a little color on his cheeks and in the bottom of his nose with some very well blended out country red. You don't want this to be real bright, solid country red float, so you want to blend it out quite a bit. So I'm going to float a little bit of country red on his cheeks. Just kind of red them up a little bit. I might want to put a little bit more. So it's up to you. If you get him too red, he looks like he's been drinking, but just probably an okay thing. And then in the bottom of his nose, and yes, that goes right on top of that dried clay that you floated in there, but he needs to have some color in the bottom of his nose. We are going to work on his hat and his suit now. And what we're going to do is we are going to dry brush highlighting with melon. And then we're going to pick up some warm white on our dirty brush just to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight. So first, dry brush with melon. So I'm going to go across the top of his hat here, and then I'm going to go into the tail a little bit, and I'm keeping that mostly in the center of that area. And I'm going to go a little on his butt. Doesn't matter if you get up into his beard a little bit, it'll be okay. I want to go down the front of each leg. And the cuff on his pants will do with a liner brush. So I've got those spaces done. So now what I want to do is I want to get in and pick up just a little bit of warm white so I get a lighter value of melon. And I'm going to go back to those places and I'm going to reinforce that highlight a little bit. But notice I'm not doing it completely filling up the area that I did before. I'm just touching just a little bit more on those areas, not covering the melon highlight completely. So shading is done with black plum. So let's grab some black plum. And we're going to float shading. Now on the hat, the shading is going to go basically all the way around the red part of the hat. And then on the pants, it's going to go across the top of his knees, down the back of his butt, and on both sides of the leg and above the cuff. So you have a lot of places that you can bounce around and let floats dry. So I'm going to start first here on his hat and go around the hat brim. So now I can let that dry. I'll go down here and go across his suit next to the beard. I'm going to go down the back of his leg. Got a little bit darker, including the cuff. And I'll go down the back of the other leg, which makes it right next to the front. I'm going to go back to his hat, and I'm going to float along this lower edge with black plum. And I will go back to his pants, and I'll float above the cuffs. Now on the hat, I'm going to go back and I'm going to float across the top of the hat. Sorry, I have a little bit of the sniffles today. Okay. I'm going to go across the top of his leg to find his knee a little bit. So just that little piece right there. And then the back of his rear end. All right. Now we have that light on the front of the scooter, and it's red also. Let's go ahead and float a highlight of melon across the top of that light. This is supposed to be like Rudolph's nose. And we'll go ahead and float a shade of black plum on the bottom. Easy peasy. We'll come back and dry brush some warm white highlighting later on. But for right now, let's just get that melon highlight and that black plum shading on that front light. The front edge of his pant legs with a highlight with melon. Blend it out really well. You don't want this to be like a straight melon line either. Okay, so let's do this leg. See, nice and soft. And then we'll come up, move over and do that leg. And yet it kind of dies off into that shadow that was at the top of his knee. Let's dry brush just a little bit of a highlight on that bulb with warm white. It's okay if it's a little more pronounced than a dry brush usually is. That's fine. So we're going to take our liner brush, and with warm white I want to add just a little touch of a highlight on the front of that bulb. And then the cuffs of the pants, the same thing. I'm going to pull from the front edge with my liner brush just a little bit of like a dry brushed highlight across the front of his cuffs. Now you want to make sure your brush for dry brushing is dry, because you don't want to have a lot of water in this. That's when it comes in handy to have a couple of these brushes that you can use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush this glow in front of the headlight onto the background, and I'm going to do that with country red plus a touch of warm white. Not too much warm white. You don't really want this to be a bright pink. You want it to be more on the red side. So I'm just going to dry brush a little of this glow on the front, or in front of that bulb, like it's lit up, like Rudolph's nose. The toy bag, we painted that with honey brown, and we are going to dry brush highlighting on it with golden straw. Okay, so I'm going to dry brush highlighting on this bag with golden straw. Pretty soon I'm going to have quite the array of colors on the back of my hand. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using the back of my hand, it's how I like to prepare my brush for dry brushing. So I'm going to get in here, and basically I'm going to dry brush all of these open areas with golden straw. And again, don't worry too much if you get it on the beard. It'll be okay. So that already looks better. Now we are going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight with warm white. So once again, you can just pick up a little bit of warm white on your dirty brush, make a lighter value, and just in the where the bulges are the most, like up here you've got a bulge, you want to dry brush a little bit brighter. I didn't get that quite bright enough. Okay, there we go. And there's going to be some here, and I would go right in here just to highlight those spots and make it look like it's kind of bulging a little bit more. I'm going to float shading on my toy bag with burnt umber. And it's basically going to go all the way around the toy bag. So you could start up here at this edge and just go right through where that tie is going to go around, and just float all the way around this bag. Almost stuck my brush in black plum. That would have been interesting. So I'm just going to go all the way around, tuck in some shading behind his little hiney, and let's go across the top edge. Now you could start down here next to the hat and then come across the top edge and over here. And I'm going to want to float next to the beard. And another float across the top of the beard and mustache. You also want to float next to the tie on both sides, so above and below where that tie is going to go. And then if you can, there's a little turn right in there. So basically all I did was stick the corner of my brush right there to give it the look that you can see just a little bit inside that bag. Okay, a little bit more shading on this edge. All right, there's some stitching that goes across the top of the bag, and that's with thinned burnt umber. So liner brush and a little bit of thin burnt umber, and just line a little stitching across the top of that bag. The tie that goes around the bag is painted with forest green. So your liner brush and some forest green. You just want to paint this tie. Right, and then while that is still wet, you want to line a highlight on that tie with Irish moss. So I just kind of take my dirty liner brush that had forest green in it, and I just pull a little bit of Irish moss across there to highlight that tie. And then shading, we're going to pull from the other edge with Hauser Dark Green, which is a color we haven't had on the palette yet. So just a little bit of Hauser Dark Green, and we'll pull a little shading on the other edge of that tie. We are going to work on his beard and no, let's go ahead. Yeah, we can work on his beard and mustache. I was trying to decide. But I wrote it the directions that way, so that's the way we're going to do it. So you're going to need a 1/4 inch filbert rake brush. And so what we're going to do first, and I always do my beards and mustaches and hair and stuff like that this way, is I'm going to work on the beard and the hair first and get that done, and then I'll go back and do the mustache, because the mustache sits on top, so you want to do it last. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make liner consistency fawn. So I'm thinning it down, and you can see I'm filling up my brush quite a bit. Then I'll go over here and blot it out, and then pick up just a little bit from the corner there, and kind of spread my brush, the bristles of my brush out a little bit. So I always like to start here. Let me see if I can get a little closer for you. I like to start in the middle here, but you also want to pay attention. His beard is blowing back. So you don't want to just pull it straight down. You want to pull it like it's being caught in the wind. And you want to paint it so it's curving back. So think like your hair blowing in the wind. So I'm just going to do this first layer, and I'm going to come off those edges to kind of disguise those edges and lose them. So it's thin fawn, and I'm doing this first layer. I'm going to do his hair. And his hair, I always kind of start pulling it on coming off of his face a little bit, kind of like your hairline if you think about it. And so I'm just going to continue to pull that first layer, and I do it with fawn because I always like to have a little bit of some kind of brown in my beard. I don't know if it softens it for me or what, but make sure you come off the edge so that you kind of start hiding the hard edges. And remember, it's blowing in the wind, so you want to make sure you make that curve. This also kind of gives you an opportunity to get a feel for your brush. Even though I use the filbert combs all the time, I still need a little bit of time to get the right angle and the right grip on my brush. So you always want to be sure. This just gives you that opportunity. Okay. Now we want to let that dry, because if we went right to the next layer, especially in these areas that I just did, we would get mush. So what I want to do is I want to go to the, we'll go on over to the windshield, and we'll work on that, and then we'll come back and we'll put the next layer on our beard. So the windshield was painted with Blue Haven, and we're just going to line a highlight through the center. You can see it here. All I'm going to do is take my liner brush and kind of line a highlight through the center of the windshield with warm white. So no water in your brush. Just pick up some warm white and just do a little rough highlight through the center of that windshield. And then we're going to float shading at the top and the bottom with Moody Blue, which is a color we haven't used in a while. So just a dot out. And a side load float of Moody Blue at the top and the bottom, which is next to his glove. Cool. Another section done. And I think we can go back to our beard now. And just the same way that we did the fawn, we are going to stroke on some warm white. Now I want you to be patient. Don't expect it to look fabulous with the first coat, and don't try to make it all in one coat. Do a couple coats of warm white. If you try to do it all at once, it ends up looking pretty blobby. So I'm going to go and start stroking on, and this is where I'm going to maybe add some waves, and I'm going to really disguise those edges. So see, nice wavy, blowing in the wind hair, or whiskers. Okay, and then his hair, be sure to start off onto his face. And this one, doesn't matter if you get up in the hat, because we're gonna stipple over that. Okay, so we'll let that dry, because we don't want to get mush. And we're going to go over and work on our candy cane. We are just going to float a very soft float of country red. I know it sounds weird, but trust me, blend it out really well, and it's a tiny corner load. And we are just going to float across the top of that candy cane and the bottom of that candy cane. So it turns kind of pink, and it'll be okay. Trust me. And now you're gonna go back, and right on top of that float, since we have that Moody Blue out there already, we're gonna float a very soft float, a Moody Blue, on top of that. And then with your liner brush, this liner brush is a little too big for me, we're going to pick up some warm white and line a highlight. And it's kind of just above center on our candy cane. Now let's go back to Santa's beard and hair, and we're going to add another coat of warm white with our filbert comb brush. And this might be enough to finish it off. And you can make your waves a little more definite with this layer. If you need to add another coat, that's fine. It's your beard. So just think like a beard blowing in the wind. And then his hair. Santa's kind of a hippie. He's got some long hair coming in there. And then on this side, all right, let me get this side just a little bit more. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna do some shading, and we'll come back and do the mustache. So let's work on the mittens. Why don't we dry brush a little bit of highlighting on those mittens, and the mittens get dry brushed with golden straw, and the scooter gets dry brushed with golden straw. So we'll go ahead and do both of those now. So a dry brush of golden straw. The mittens are kind of little, so just get what you can in there. And then the scooter, you want to be sure you get it on the post that the handlebars are on. I don't own a scooter, so I don't know the technical terms. Although I am getting an electric bike, that's kind of a scooter. So I'm going to go on this fender, dry brush it pretty good. And I'm going to go on this fender, dry brush it pretty good. Now on the scooter, you want to pick up a little warm white and dry brush some brighter highlighting on it. So dirty brush, just pick up some warm white, and let's dry brush a little bit more brighter highlight on the scooter. Now we are going to go back to his beard, and we are going to float a little bit of shading on the hair under the hat brim and above and below the mustache with a mix of burnt umber, and if you can still get in your sapphire blue, that would be great. More brown than blue. Needs to have just a touch of a blue hint to it. So I'm going to go right here. Looks like I need to make it a little darker. It kind of makes it a gray brown. So I'm just going to touch a little bit up here where it's going to get tucked under his hat. And I'm going to go all the way around the mustache to separate it and put it on top of the beard. Okay, and I also want to go above the mustache. Make that a little darker. I need a little bit darker under here. So all I'm doing is separating the mustache and setting it on top. So now the mustache, we're going to do the same way. We're going to stroke on some fawn, let it dry, and then we'll come back and stroke on some warm white. So get into your thin fawn again. Think like a mustache. And just stroke on this mustache. And we are going to come back onto this mustache with a liner brush to make more definite whiskers. So get this first layer on with the filbert comb, and then let that dry just a little bit, and then let's come back with a liner brush. This is a number 2 that I'm using, and thin down some paint, and now I'm going to make more definite strokes. I'm going to work coming from both ways just so I can be sure to cover those edges. But keep in mind, mustaches don't come from just one spot on the nose. They're spread out. If your husband has a mustache, go look at his. Doesn't come out from just one spot. It's kind of spread out. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. And be sure to come off the edge so you kind of hide that hard edge. You would lose the mustache if we hadn't put that shading underneath. So that's why we had to do that. And we are going to come back and add some shading on the mustache itself underneath his nose. Now if you want to, you could also come in here and make more definite little hairs coming off of his face. Just you know, because this is a realistic Santa, right? All right, so let's get a little bit of a float of that burnt umber sapphire mix and float that onto the mustache under his nose. You want to keep it sheer, but you want to be able to see it too. Sometimes I blend it down so much you don't even see it. There we go. All right, awesome. Moving right along. So we want to put the pattern on for his goggles. So you want to grab your graphite and the pattern. And let's get that goggle pattern on there. Pen, there it is. These nice round goggles. I can see that. Yep, can. So we are going to paint the goggles and in the earpieces with graphite. Not the centers, just the frames. Okay, one coat should do. Just a quick little base coat of those frames. They kind of stop at his nose. They're tucked in there behind his nose. Now, what I want to do is I kind of lost the highlight on his nose a little, so while I have warm white out that I can get into easily, I'm going to refloat that highlight across the top of his nose just to reinforce it and make his nose stand out a little bit more in front of those goggles. All right, and the glass inside is painted with Blue Haven, which was the color of the windshield. So you want to paint inside the goggles with Blue Haven. Okay, oh, he looks cute already. So we are going to line a little bit of a highlight on the frame with warm white and a liner brush. And that's going to go on the arms a little bit. And it's going to go across the top of the frames and across the little nose piece. Then I'm going to need lamp black, which is a color I haven't used yet. Now this is going to be teeny tiny little floats of lamp black. And you're going to do that on the frames. Get some water out of that brush. I'm going to do it at the outside of the frames, the arms. I'm going to do it on the arms next to the rims. I want to do it on the nose piece next to the rims. And then I also want to do it on the rims. So you can see I'm just kind of touching the corner of the brush on the rims next to the nose. Oops, guess I should get up there. So right here, and right here, here, and here. They're teeny tiny floats, but they make a big difference. Now the glass inside, you want to float inside the bottom of the glass with Moody Blue. So that's going to be right here next to his nose and in the bottom. Doesn't that make it look cute? So. All right, so then again, with the liner brush, you want to line some diagonal lines across the glass just to give it the look of a reflection of the glass. Okay, you also want to take your liner brush and give him some eyebrows above his goggles. So you just take your liner brush and tap on some eyebrows above those goggles. Oh, he looks cute. I hope you guys are happy with the way yours are going so far. All right, let's work on this fur trim. 3 places. It's been painted with fawn, so we are going to pick up with our with a brush you like to stipple with. I like to use the Lang-Nichols short round. Pick up some fawn on that brush, and then pick up a little bit of warm white and tap it off on your brush, on your palette, so that you get a little bit of a blend. So we're gonna tap in highlighted stippling, and it's not going to be the lightest yet. And I'm going to go across the top of his hat. Now make sure you come off that hard edge to make it look fluffy. And there's also that fur trim on his cuff of his suit. So then I'm going to pick up fawn. I just wiped my brush out. I didn't wash it. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of burnt umber and tap and blend that on my palette a little bit. And I'm turning my piece over, and I'm going to work on the bottom and tap in some shading. Some shading on this hat brim. Now, be sure to go off the edge. If it gets on his eyebrows, that's okay. The fur goes down there, so. This isn't done yet, so I know we got kind of a line there, but it'll be okay. And I want to tap a little bit of this dark down in the bottom of his, got a little out there. Down in the bottom of his cuff. So now I'm going to pick up fawn again. I still haven't washed my brush out. I've just been wiping it. But I'm going to pick up more warm white this time. And I'm going to stipple a little bit brighter highlighting. And I always like to make it a little chunky. So, I don't know why, I just do. So I'm just going to add some more. And I might even want it a little bit whiter. So I'll pick up more warm white and just give it some texture. And then let's get down here on his cuff a little bit. Cuff doesn't have a lot. go back down to our scooter, and we've done the dry brushed highlights. So let's float some shading with Hauser dark green. And there are several places that we float shading on this guy. So another opportunity to bounce around. So let's go first across the top of this tail light there. Let's go down this back side. And then you can go down and around this hub, down the back side of that. I want you to go next to the hub on the scooter. And it kind of goes by his feet there. Get it up in there. Let's go on this foot piece here, right next to the hubcap. Let's go under the mitten, and as long as we're floating Hauser dark green, we can float it on the mitten next to the cuff and on the tips of the fingers. And let's go down the back side of this fender. Now we can go back to the back end of the bike again and float the bottom of this tail light. And I can go on the scooter next to that fender. I can do the other side of the fender. So I've got like a back-to-back float right there. I also want to float this across the bottom of that fender. Now, if you like to mop out floats, this would be a good time to do that. Got some water in there. I'm going to do across the bottom of the front fender, both edges. And again on this little floorboard thing here. And down the front edge. All right. We want to go under the seat if you look at yours and you think you need it. What I want to do on this front fender is I want to do just a little float of golden straw just along that inside edge. Doesn't have to be real bright. Okay. And let's see, we do have one more place for the Hauser dark green that I missed. We want to go on the handlebar next to the hubcap. Okay, there are a few brighter highlights on this guy. So we're going to dry brush and also line some brighter highlights with warm white. So first I'll get out my dry brush. And I'm going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight in the top of the fenders. Okay, just those tops of the fenders. Then I'm going to take my liner brush and warm white, and I'm going to line a little bit brighter highlight on the tail light, on the back end, on the fender in a couple places. And do it on this front fender in a couple places. And I'm also going to do it on the front of the handlebars. We are getting really close to done, guys. The boots, the seat, and the tires get a dry brush highlight of moody blue plus a touch of warm white. So moody blue, but you want to lighten it up a little bit with warm white. Still want it to be blue, but a very light blue. So I'm going to go on the seat. The handlebar, you can just line that. But the tires, dry brush on there. And it's okay if you get off onto the hubcaps because we have shading and stuff that goes on those. Okay, you also want to dry brush this moody blue warm white mix on the boots. So I'm going to touch a little in the back boot and a little on the front boot. Now I'm going to float shading on those with lamp black. So I'm going to go to the seat here. I'm going to float lamp black around the back edge. And then I'm going to float next to his legs. I'm going to go on each tire next to the fender. I'm going to go on the boots. I want to go down the back side of this boot, the whole boot that you can see. And then I'm going to go on the back boot next to the front boot and also next to the fender. So it gets filled in pretty much with floats of lamp black. You're also going to float lamp black on the tires next to the hubcap. So if you need to use a smaller brush to do that, by all means. But you want to get a float around the hubcap on the tires. A little bit of lamp black on the background there, that's okay. All right, looks pretty good. The soles of the boot are just a line, and you can only see one sole. So just a little fat sole on the boot with lamp black And then you can just pick up a little bit of warm white and line a highlight through it. You're going to dry brush some highlighting on the trim, anything that's slate gray. So the trim on the tail light, the exhaust pipe, and the hubcaps. You want to dry brush a little warm white on those. So I'm going to dry brush in the center there, there. Oops, let me get up here. There, and on this trim. We're going to float shading on those places with Moody Blue plus just a touch of Lamp Black. Not a lot. It's kind of like wave your brush over it. You just want to deepen that Moody Blue a little bit. Was that, or bring in another color? We didn't want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go top of that trim on the tail light, and I want to go on the tailpipe next to the scooter. And I'm going to come over here and do the bottom of the tail light. The hubcaps, I'm going to float inside the hubcaps, but I'm going to leave just a little bit of a rim. So I'm not floating way down in the, on the edge of the hubcap. I'm leaving that little rim on both of them. And I got really dark on that. And I got on my scooter, but I'll just clean that up. Now, I'm going to line a highlight on the rim that I left. So I'm going to do that with a liner brush and warm white. So just a little highlight on there. And then you also want to line just a little highlight inside the hubcap with warm white. So this is where you can kind of fix. See, my hubcap was a little wonky. So I'm going to use that warm white to fix it a little bit. I'm going to have that little highlight. So I'm going to go in and add a little bit of shading on the hubcap under the fender. That's what was bothering me. And let's do that. There's a little bit of smoke that's coming out of the exhaust pipe. So we want to do that with warm white, just a float. So I'm just going to pretend that this is the smoke. And I go one way, and then I go the other, to give him that look of smoke. Okay, as long as we have warm white, we can streak a little bit of ground on. Okay, now we just have a couple of things left to do. We have to do our little gingerbread man and our horn. So I'm going to take him, and I'm just, he's painted in sable brown, and I'm going to very lightly stipple him with some warm white. Not a lot, just a little. And if you wanted to tone that down a little bit, maybe pick up a little fawn. Got a little bright. There. And then he has with a lighter brush, you want to take and line on his frosting with warm white. Make sure you line it close enough to the edge that you leave room for his little face. Okay. And he has little eyes and a little mouth and a button or two that you add with your liner brush and lamp black. Little eyes. Tiny mouth. And a button or two. Now, if you could get in there and highlight the eyes and the buttons, that would be great. And that would be with warm white. Just a touch. Okay. Now the horn is painted with golden straw. And we are going to float some shading. We're going to float a highlight across that front edge with warm white. So basically just the corner of your brush. And I went outside, so I'll just clean it up with the water side of my brush. And then I'm going to float some shading inside the horn with burnt umber. Okay. And I also took my liner brush with warm white and just kind of lined the edge to make it a little more defined. And then again with burnt umber, what you want to do is you want to float across the top of the bag, but where's my burnt umber? On the candy cane, the gingerbread man, and the horn next to the bag. So just to kind of set them into the bag a little bit. So float on the items in the bag next to the bag with burnt umber. I'm going to spatter my piece with warm white, however you like to spatter. They're kind of light spatters, not real heavy. So I'm going to thin down some warm white. And I like to spatter by beating two brushes together, the ferrules of two brushes. So getting nice soft spatters all over, because it's snowing. I'm going to take my liner brush and I'm going to line a few snowflakes here and there. I did 5. So just quickly line your basic snowflakes, or if you want to take more time, you can get fancier. And you can add more if you like. It's completely up to you. But always have an odd number. And then you want to dot those snowflakes if you can keep your hands out of them. I always like to dot things with my liner brush because they dry faster than if I use my stylus. And then I'm less apt to put my hands in them. Whoops, that's a kind of very messy looking snowflake, but hey, no two are alike, right? I'm going to turn this over so I do stand a better chance of not getting my fingers in it. And now I just took my finger and some, you can use graphite, you can use lamp black, either one would do, just my finger. And I'm just going to run it around that edge that I roughed up, just to paint it. And this is where you'll be able to see those cuts that you made in earlier. And I like to use my finger because it's easier than loading a brush. So this is graphite. You can use whatever color you'd like. Then you paint that edge. We have one more thing to do. See, I managed to not get my fingers in the dots so far because I wasn't paying attention. Okay, almost there. I'm running out of graphite on my palette, so I'm trying to squeeze out the last little bit. All right. What I did is I lined a little stripe around the edge with thinned warm white. In the picture, it's going to look like it's light blue, but it really is thinned warm white. And all I did, it's a rough line. It kind of follows that cut edge a little bit, but it just helps finish it off. All right, good job. There you go. Don't forget to sign it. Add your wire, whichever kind you got, and just have a great time. I hope you know somebody that rides a scooter or a motorcycle that you can give this guy to. Anyway, thanks for joining me. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me. I look forward to painting with y'all again sometime.